To those of you who were with us last time on Hope Rescue Podcast, we talked about the psychological benefits of generosity.
Yep.
And it's, giving is probably one of the misunderstood disciplines of life because we think it is something it's not. Generosity is actually what we're called to do. We are meant to be generous.
Right.
We're meant to, do you remember that confrontation of God and you remember Cain killed Abel.
Right.
And Cain's response is, "Where's your brother?" He goes, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And the answer is, yes, you are. And you did a bad job. You killed your brother out of jealousy. And the answer, I think, is really important. We are our brother's keeper. We are responsible for other human beings in this world, not just our children, not just our grandchildren, not just our spouse and our close friends. We're responsible for the guy on the street corner. We're responsible for the neighbor down the street. We're responsible for that hurting person who's struggling in life. And one of the great aspects of Christianity is this just internal, as the Holy Spirit rules the life, this internal drive that comes from us to be generous.
And that comes from our ultimate example, obviously, that God so loved the world that he gave.
He gave.
That was,
you look at love, always is giving, Husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church and what? Gave himself. Yeah. For God so loved the world that he gave himself. It's over and over again. Love always demonstrates in giving.
Yeah.
And one of the ways to find out whether you really love people is, do you give?
Yeah.
And not give to manipulate, give to love. And anyway, we talked about the psychological benefits, and if you missed that podcast, go back to our previous episode 192 on our website, hoperescuepodcast.org, hoperescuepodcast.org, and listen to that. But today we want to kind of switch gears just a little bit and talk about the overlooked thoughts about generosity. Listen to this verse, Acts 20:35. "In all things, I have shown you that by working hard in this way, we must help the weak and remember the words of the Lord Jesus." So help the weak and remember the words of the Lord Jesus, how he said to himself, or how he said himself, "It is more blessed to give than receive." So what are the aspects of that are so important?
So the first I would talk about would be how important it is for us to be strategic in our giving. The recipient may need more or less than a sandwich or $1. We know that. Like, that's the quick thing you think of is like, let me throw this guy a buck and whatever. But we need to see how we can connect with someone's heart when we are giving. So I think in terms of outside of like just resources, how powerful it is when someone is intentional about your specific needs. And for instance, we'll give you their time.
Yeah.
We'll give you their shoulder to cry on.
Right.
We'll give you meaningful interaction and thoughtful wisdom or responses like this. We're not just talking about your dollar bills, right?
Right.
But I mean, obviously that is a resource that makes a difference a lot in people's lives. But I think about, we've been involved in serving the homeless through Hope Rescue Podcast now since we've started this, and we do meet those needs of the sandwiches and the food giving and that sort of thing. But there's so much more beyond that. In our years of being involved in homeless, we've seen that when you can actually take the time to allow them to take a shower, to be able to talk to them about how to do an interview,
and
to give them the clothing, right, get a clothing set up for them, but some tools, to help them, just not that temporary on the spot need, which is valuable, but actually get into their story, understand why they are where they are. And I was just thinking when you were talking about the intro, if our world changed its perspective on that, where everybody did something for somebody every day, we would live in a different place globally.
Yeah.
And
there are a lot of generous people in this world, but just think about this. Let me give you a perspective that I've struggled with, and that is, when you see somebody on the street that you don't know and they're either homeless or, they're We used to call it panhandling, or begging. How do you say? Begging. And I'm struggling with the
begging
vowels here. Anyway, so when you see somebody, you go, well, if I give them money, they're going to use it for, you're not responsible for that.
Right.
But one of the things that you can do is earn the right to speak into that person's life. If you give them $10 or $20 or whatever it is, or a sandwich, or as Kimberly always had these power bars, these protein bars in her car. But if you're walking down the street especially, and if you give something to someone that's going to help their felt or their actual financial need, just sit down and talk to them. Take a moment to connect with them. That's what you were talking about, that it goes beyond $1.
Right.
It goes beyond, just giving monetarily or physical things, but to actually connect with that person.
And we have good people doing that, so I don't want to diminish,
No, of course.
Especially now there's such an emphasis on those who are struggling on the streets that have mental health issues, and there's a greater emphasis on that. But even in that situation, like, do you have time to contribute in your life to go serve in one of those facilities to be able to help someone, give them a leg up? I'm all about the dollar bill and the protein bar. I do that, but I think that there is so much more. But and that's a unique niche of people that we're talking about in this premise. I'm talking about, though, in our day-to-day lives, even people that we come across in the rhythm of our life. Do we look them in the eye and say, I've got 15 minutes in your own heart? Yeah, this is a person. Can I be a good listener for 15 minutes? Can I give my time, my attention?
Yeah.
Those kind of things life would be so different.
Yeah, here's a tough thing. You look at society that's being denigrated. Just be real about this. Denigrated by the proliferation of homelessness.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that is due to drug abuse. A lot of it is due to mental health issues, which the mental health issues a lot of times are tied into drugs. But, you can complain about that and, do things about that and so forth, but they're there. And see this as an opportunity. Jesus said, do this because the poor will always be with you. They're always going to be poor. And God has called us to love them well. Anyway, the point being that reach out to that person. So be strategic in your giving was what Kimberly was talking about. The second thing is receive well. So it's more blessed to give than receive, but it is blessed to receive. So think about that. When you receive with gratitude. And let me give you an example. Somebody gives you a compliment. And you go, oh, no, you try to debate them.
Yeah.
No, oh, you look really nice. No, this old thing. I just got it out of the closet. I don't even know if I was going to wear it. But, if somebody gives you a compliment, receive it well. Say thank you. And that's all you have to say. You don't even have to give a speech or, debate them on whether they're being right or wrong. Somebody tells you look nice. Don't try to read into that.
Just say, that's so kind, because you're giving back a word of encouragement as well.
And if somebody gives you something because you have a need, don't be someone to go, well, that's humiliating. No, you know what? I've been there. Kimberly's been there. And, it's a beautiful thing when somebody gives, and it's blessed for them. But don't take away their blessing because you're not willing to receive.
Oh, that's good.
Both of you, it's an exchange. And I don't mean that transactionally, but I mean it's exchange of love. Receive it well, give it well.
Right.
So
that's good. And then the third point is to be grateful. I love these quotes. I'm going to read these. Your gratitude will determine your generosity. Think about that, because gratitude links us to the heart of others in our giving. And when we live in a place of gratitude, and you're so grateful and thankful for the ways that you have been blessed. None of us have it all together. None of us have a overflowing cup of everything in our life all the time. But there's always a blessing in being able to focus in on saying, gosh, Lord, thank you so much for what you're doing in my life in this area. Because he's always working and staying in a place of gratitude and thanking him for it. And what happens with that is it makes you feel like you're living in abundance and you have something to give.
Yeah.
And whatever that area or those areas are, be willing to recognize where it comes from, being grateful to the Lord, and then being generous because of it.
Yeah. So if your generosity is connected to your generosity is connected to your gratitude, then understand this. The level of your gratitude is going to determine the level of your generosity.
Yeah.
So if you are not overwhelmingly grateful for what God has given to you, you're going to try to hoard what you have.
Right.
But when you release it because you're so grateful, you release especially the surplus. You go, I'm grateful for this. I don't need this, but somebody else might be grateful for it. That's a wonderful thing, whether it's clothing or money or time or whatever it is. So, be grateful, and God will use you to be generous. Talking about generosity, there are certain components to generosity I think are really important. One is a desire to help someone else. That there is, I think, every one of it. If you think that this world is terrible, and there are a lot of terrible things going on, and we disagree on a lot of things and a lot of political, everybody's trying to divide us. But all you have to do is get in a crisis in a community, a catastrophic problem, and watch the community rally.
Right.
There's always those people that are going to go, okay, the power's off. I'm going to go into houses and steal things. There are those people. Those people don't run society. The people that run society are the ones that care. I just, little things like, you see a police officer go into a coffee shop and you buy their coffee or their breakfast. You see a mother and a daughter, and you just want to pay it forward, and you go,
buy their Starbucks in the drive-thru.
Those are great things. But when you have desire to help someone else, that is really what generosity is about. That's first component.
Right. And I think it's important. The second thing is to not do it in thought of what's our return. In other words, is there a tax break involved? Is there going to be social acknowledgement? Because that taints the whole process, right?
We give somebody a check. You ever see those checks that are given to a charity?
The lotto check.
And the check is like bigger than both people. It's a big postcard. I, Timothy Scott, give to
$200.
$200, and it's this big check, and you go out there and we get a photo op.
Right.
It's not about that.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I think third is, being free from obligation or legal responsibility as well.
Yeah.
And
that spiritual, think about that. The Bible tells me I have to give, so I give now.
Yeah. You use the word when you talk about it and then the church is that we don't give out of compulsion. And I love that, which means the twisting of the arm. Because that's the wrong reason to do it. And we'll probably talk about that in our third episode more.
Paul said, don't give out of compulsion.
Right.
You're right.
Yeah.
And when he wrote to Corinth and talked about giving, the great passage on New Testament giving is 2 Corinthians 8 and 9. But
we don't do it out of, that we're being held to like a legal standard to do it or whatever. And then the fourth is we don't do it because we're trying to be free from fear of bad things happening to us. We don't do it out of fear of like, if I don't give, then maybe I'm going to, my bank's going to shut down tomorrow like some of these others.
Or I do know people that do this and maybe don't realize they think if I give this, God is going to really benefit me even more.
Right. That's the other side of it, is that you're giving with like you're putting it in the bank expecting to get a bigger return.
Yeah. God is so weak that he's manipulated.
Right. Those aren't healthy reasons why to give. Those are interesting components. But there's a great scripture in Matthew 6:2. It talks about giving the left and the right hand. I'm going to read it to you. It says, "Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you." In other words, don't blast it out there as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly, I say to you that they've already received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. In other words, don't be telling people and expecting word to get around, so that your giving may be in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Yeah. So we gotta don't do it for the show. Don't do it for the acknowledgement. Do it because it's the right thing to do, and because we can. Because we get to.
Yeah, that whole idea of left hand and right hand, if I I could close my eyes and, touch my fingers, all four fingers and my thumbs exactly with my eyes closed, because, there's synchronicity in our body, and our left and our right kind of are connected and they work together, and I can fold my hands. I don't have to look and all those things. And we have that coordination. Not letting your left hand and your right hand know what's going on. When you give over here, the other part of you, the other side of you. So I give out of my finances, but my ego doesn't embrace it. So it's not like this is affecting me. I'm giving without impact on my ego.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. And we don't let our generosity be driven by the deficit in our heart, which we kind of touched on that earlier. Right. And it's not about the giver, but the recipient and the Lord. Staying focused on that. That this is not about me. This is not about me. Yeah. This is about honoring the Lord and blessing others.
A thing that we probably don't think about very often is, and I mean, maybe if you grew up in the church, you've probably heard this. It used to really bug me that we would pass an offering plate. And I actually see the value in not doing that. We don't do that in our churches. Right. In the church we are. And, people give online, people give at a box in the back, or they can, take a card out of the chair in front of them and put a check in there, or cash, or whatever they want to give. But, the vast majority of people give online, but my dad used to say, and my dad was my pastor when I was a kid, and he would say, this is our form of worship. And it is. The problem with that was, giving in worship without really contemplating what you're giving to. And, there's this kind of, before we get into that too much, I want to talk about what I call utilitarian generosity. Utilitarian generosity is giving with the idea of outcome. In other words, when we talk about utilitarian, we're talking about usefulness. When we talk about worship, it's a little it's not so easy to say, well, you build a building and it's useful, people can go in outside of the weather. When you worship, it's a little more abstract than the utility of something, the usefulness of something. And so we think of worship almost as an add-on to life. Like I'll worship, or I'll pray. And when we give, we need to get away from this, what's going to be the outcome? What is this going to do to people when I give? There is, in all of creation, think about this. In all of creation, I was just listening to a podcast. I listened to this thing called Business Wars, and it's the war between two companies trying to fight on the non-governmental companies, the private sector having a space race. And they're talking about the space race, SpaceX versus Blue, whatever, I've forgotten the name of it. But, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, and the space race is going on, and they're talking about the immensity of the universe. And I'm thinking, what you can see, and even what we can see with telescopes, doesn't even scratch the surface of the universe. It is so beyond our comprehension. And the reason the universe is so big is because the universe, according to Psalm 19:1, says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Yes. So, what you can see tells you something, but what you can't see tells you something about God too. we don't understand God in his totality. He's immense. He's eternal. He's omniscient. He's omnipresent. He's omnipotent. It's beyond our comprehension. And worship is like that. And I believe if we're going to truly, if I can try to tie this together, if we truly want our worship to be, our generosity to be tied to worship, we need to see that giving is not just to meet a need. That's utilitarian.
That's good.
It is to worship God, to glorify God. And there are just a couple of points on that that I think are important here.
The first is giving, obviously, to the need is important. So we're not pushing that aside, but that's not the reason. But there's something greater than giving to the poor or a church project. I'll read Matthew 26:6. It says this. Now, when Jesus was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, a woman came up to him with an alabaster flask of very expensive ointment, and she poured it on his head, and he reclined at the table. And when the disciples saw it, they were indignant, saying, "Why is this waste? For this could have been sold for a large sum and given to the poor." But Jesus, aware of this, said to them, "Why do you trouble this woman? For she has done a beautiful thing to me. For you've always had the poor with you, but you will not always have me. In pouring this ointment on my body, she has done it to me to prepare me for burial. Truly I say to you, wherever this gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." And boy, has it ever.
Yeah, so think about that. They were thinking utilitarian.
Right.
And they're utilitarian. What is the use of taking this perfume? So what did Jesus do instead of saying, hey, all you're worried about is usefulness or utilitarian worship? He probably wouldn't have used that term,
good.
but what it was is about worshiping me. But he appealed to their utilitarian side and said, hey, she's preparing me for burial. She didn't think that. I don't think she was thinking, Jesus is going to die and I'm going to prepare him for burial. But Jesus turned that around and used their utilitarian generosity and mindset to show them something. This is for my glory. This is an act of worship.
That's so good.
So get past, we're building this building as a church, or we're having this new ministry, or we're doing, feeding the homeless or whatever. It's all about God. Your generosity needs to supersede all of those utilitarian ideas. Even those are important, as Kimberly said. It is important to meet those needs, but it's really, at the end of the day, it's all about worship. So you don't have to know how the gift that you give to the Lord is going to be used. You just need to know that God is going to use it for his glory.
He's in charge of the outcome. We do the input. We give as unto worship to him.
Right.
And then he takes whatever we give, wherever it is, that's released into his hands, and you let it go as unto worship to him. And it's very freeing, because there are people who give who want to control where it goes.
Yeah.
And we've seen that, and, Lord bless them.
Yeah.
But that's not the point. Otherwise, just invest in something that but you have to see it as this offering is in my hands, and I release it as unto God, and it's his job then to take that and bless it and use it in the places that it needs to be done.
Yeah. So next week, what we're going to talk about? We're going to talk about generosity.
It's our last episode on generosity.
But you know what we're going to talk about specifically? Do you remember?
I don't.
Yeah. Okay. It's the difficult issue of tithing.
Tithing. Oh, it's going to be good.
Yeah, and it's going to be good.
Yeah.
I think you're going to find out God has some really valuable New Testament truth, and what we're going to do is explain the difference between the Old Testament system and the New Testament system. I think you're going to want to hear that. We'll do that next week on Hope Rescue Podcast.
I'm going to put it in a nutshell. It's about the joy of giving versus being feeling beat over the head or obligatory.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Hey, join us next week. Thanks for listening this week. God bless you. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.